And all right, we are live. And tonight I'm joined by Jules Louise. And Jules, I met through her husband, Ray, who is a detransitioner. And I had Jules on a couple months ago to talk about her experiences desisting from being a true believer in gender ideology and a lot of the more fringe ideas that are popular in LGBT spaces right now. And we talked about your journey kind of coming out of that. So I'm curious, how have the last few months been for you since our last stream? Do you still feel like your mind's expanding at the same rate, or do you kind of feel like
God, yes,
because you put out that
new.
picture and I was like, I feel like that too, like the brain exploding.
I threw out that picture where like there's that meme where like your brain's small and then it lights up more and then it like expands and is like all light up. I threw that out and was like, that's how I feel after like not being ideologically rigid and like trying to use my black and white thinking and stop caring if other people feel like I'm have the right ideas or not. It's like, yeah, I feel like my mind's just like, whoa, like everyone, like so many ideas that people say are possibly something I could agree with that I just didn't consider deeply enough or wasn't open to before. It's wild, like for sure. I think that's why I think we have radical feminism in the title, because like that was not accessible to me before, because I grew up like I say like indoctrinated into queer theory since like high school. So of course I
feel like the same way, because that was the popular viewpoint in many LGBT spaces, was this kind of queer theory, gender ideology, and we're of like a similar age and like demographics. So I feel like we did kind of come up when that was really
it's like taken over,
and then it hit the mainstream, you know, and it's like now here we are stepping back being like, wait, what the fuck?
Yeah, I'm in my 30s, so it's been like 20 years of straight up queer theory for me until like last year. And so pretty wild. A small recap of how I got into that is well, I'm gay and I like could not avoid that. Like I didn't really want to do that because it sounded like a tough life. When I was like in high school, I wanted to be like maybe a politician. I was like, I don't know, I want to do something that impacts our world, like maybe a politician. So I need to be electable. And I was like, I can't be a gay atheist. Like 0% of people tend to vote for gay atheists in the United States at that time, like in the early mid-2000s.
I mean, even now it was like for even a Democrat, for even a Democrat to be an atheist. Like gay is more accepted, but you still need that like.
There were very few people. There were very few elected officials that were like out at that point, especially out before they were elected. Like it was very, very few. So I was like, I don't want to do this. Like I don't want to like, you know, have a limited opportunity to impact the world because people like think I'm like weird and fringe and don't like my ideas. So it was like really like repressive, even though I was like at a liberal public school. Like people were like totally open to me having whatever ideas I wanted at school, and at home they're kind of like boring suburban sort of Democrat type people, but so they weren't like, oh, you should be gay. They were like, I'm not comfortable with that, but I'm not gonna say it because that's bad. It was more like like I'm unfamiliar with gayness, so that's your thing if you do it. Like that's what it felt like at home. But like there was nothing limiting me. There was no one like hating on me really. I mean, there was Christianity around, like that didn't feel good, but you know, so I don't know. It was just it was hard to like want to come out and like, until I like needed to come out, and I was like, I've been desperately in love with like several women by this point, and like I can't deny it anymore. I started like pushing away some of my friends whenever I like got crushes on them. I would like ruin my friendships out of like internalized homophobia. So I was just like, I need to admit that like I'm doing that so that I don't come out as gay, and I need to just come out as gay so I quit being like terrible. I'd be like, let me piss her off so I don't have to talk to her and notice how I have a crush on her anymore.
Right. Did you do you feel like your family, you said that they were like kind of accepting? Did you feel like they were superficially accepting? Because I was just thinking about
they didn't even act like accepting. They just acted like they weren't it was like the unspeakable topic. Like they were just like uncomfortable with it, but they didn't necessarily want to be uncomfortable with it, so they just like wouldn't speak about it, which made me really uncomfortable with it and feel strange.
Especially if you're in a culture, and especially like, you know, super younger people who are watching this they just don't fucking remember how different things were 20 years ago.
But gay marriage was not
20
legal.
years ago. Like that's why I think you're starting to see this friction between like older like lesbians and gays and the younger like TQ plus, you know, that like kind of
like a different idea of what our needs are, like what our behavior should be in order to meet our needs, or I don't know, or just different needs, like different cultural situation for a lot of people.
And it's like sometimes those needs conflict, and sometimes
there's still all those people that are living in like ultra like religious or whatever families who are towns or whatever who like are not, who like really don't want them to be gay and stuff, like their kids, their high school kids or whatever. And so those people still need the same things that we needed 20 years ago. And then there's like all these other people who are like, oh, I've had rainbow flags in my classrooms, in my bedroom, and in front of my house since I was like 2, and like I should be gay if I want to, and like it's like you guys don't get it. It's just wild. Like your life is so different.
And I think that's part of the reason why maybe you see like the younger like TQ plus side of the LGBT like more ready to throw away ideas of like sex and sex differences and like what it really means to be homosexual and what that entails. You see a lot more willingness to just say, oh, there's never a need for any same-sex space. Like, what would that be? There's no sex differences. Like that's debunked, you know, and like just that's just what's been.
Yeah, it's like a freedom thing, and then it gets all mixed up with leftism, like saying like, oh, I'm so far left, but then at the same time you end up being super individualistic and like separating yourself from like some sort of solid, grounded in reality, material reality sort of movement. Where you're all like sort of coalesce and have the same goal. Like you kind of like separate yourself from that and start going like, what do I want to do? Like it's about my internal reflection, like pondering my own self and my own desires. Like, dude, that's not leftism. You're supposed to be like communal, like you're supposed to be interested in like solidarity and like
like working for like
I guess people would say
like
they have,
right like and not just this constant like examining your brain for flaws or looking for a new like thing about you to like label. And you know, it's weird. It has become it's very concerning, just like the total disregard for like the reality of like as women we are oppressed based on our biology.
Like there's plenty of like, it's like the queer movement is like not really kind of making space for like, you know, like straight women to still be like advocated for so much. Like there's still plenty of like straight women in marriages who like deserve to like have their situations spoken about and stuff. Like, you know, there's a lot of, you know, like male female relationships where like there's risk for like violence and abuse and stuff. Of course there's a risk for violence and abuse in like any relationship, but like, you know, like there's like the cultural like trend or like the amount of percentage of times it would be, you know, in like a lot of male female relationships there's like that risk for power dynamic to kind of go awry, and people don't want to talk about that because they're like, oh, males aren't men and men aren't males and females aren't women, and like screw that, let's go, like straight people suck anyway, stop being cisgender, like let's go party at the drag show. And like that's what I used to do. Like I'm really tired of it.
Like
so
that was very much my like nice let's go die pigs die. It's a very childlike way of viewing the world of like good guys versus bad guys, and you know, you get to like opt in to be a good guy, you know, and be, you know, you get that hero's journey by being oppressed and standing for something, you get purpose. Like there's so many things that like activism, like people find gratifying in activism, but it seems least of all the actual material benefit of the communities that they seek to advocate for. And that's like what I think the biggest issue we face is that like it's the lack of being based in reality. because it fucking matters, you know, like
Yeah.
there's no way of coming up with some kind of comprehensive like policy to address people's needs that doesn't factor in reality. And it's
Someone in the
mind
comments
bending, you know.
said the narcissism of small differences is what we're talking about. I haven't heard of that, but sounds accurate probably.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
It is like,
God.
and it's in some ways like labels can be helpful for you to organize around a label, meet other
Yeah.
people, but we aren't seeing the labels used that way when it's like die cishet scum. And there's obviously like these negative connotations, even if like, you know, I've never found the term like cis offensive, you know, but like
But
I do
people use
see
it when they're angry to express their anger. They'll be like, I hate cis people. Like, you know,
yeah, it
like some
does
people
end
do
up,
that all the time, and that's how they use it.
yeah,
So, you
it
know,
does end
whether
up
or not
like
the term itself sucks.
kind of being an insult, you know.
Yeah, they'll use it to like other themselves from mainstream society, and it's like, bro, like I don't know. I've started to value sort of trying to make everything run smooth for all of society rather than totally upend everything and change it all and make everyone like freer from that perspective. Like we don't need to, I don't know, like we don't need to do it in a way that like leaves half the people behind, like all the cisgender straight people behind or something. Like I don't, that's not
not a smart or sustainable like plan to get a mass amount of people working together, because it's like most people are cisgender, you know. And actually I was kind of curious, how do you feel about like, do you feel that there is a distinct difference of gender identity versus sex? Like where do you stand like on that these days? Like what is your thoughts on that, if it's something you've been thinking about?
I really just think like gender and sex. So I was taught since high school that gender and sex are two like completely independent variables. Like you can think about one and the other and they're not tied to each other at all. And you can have any combination of them you possibly could imagine. And
it's
also
arbitrary, which when you're given is assigned randomly, you know.
And now I think like sex is, you know, the vast majority of us are either a male or a female very clearly. And you know, whether or not some people, you know, have a disorder of sexual development or whatever that they themselves or medical professionals consider to be sort of like ambiguous which sex they are, like that's a very small percentage of people, and it's okay to have, you know, like outliers or whatever. That doesn't make the two sex binary sex system like not exist and not be real and not be accurate when you're describing. You can just say like, oh yeah, and some people like, you know, have sort of some characteristics of being male and some physical characteristics of being female, and they're in a different combination than the majority, but it's like 0.0 whatever, you know. That doesn't mean that you have to like prioritize that in every single conversation and never talk about males and females.
It just seems like we've just gotten to such a like crazy like pendulum swing, and it's like I understand the hesitation to talk about like biological differences, and I'm often as an insult called a biological essentialist, which I don't know, I think that might just be descriptive of how I feel in a lot of ways, but they're saying it like I do think everyone's behavior is biologically determined. All you are is a body in an environment. What else would be going on, you know?
I read a lot of Daniel Quinn when I was in high school and young adult, and Daniel Quinn, he talks about like animism, basically like how we're just another species of animal on this earth, and we're part of nature. We just like kind of try and feel like we're special and we're outside of the laws of nature, but like really the laws of nature can come back around and get us anytime, like karma, you know, like I don't know, if we pollute too much, like nature's gonna swing back around and let it known that we are beholden to laws of nature to whatever degree.
So or like anytime there's a natural disaster, people, you know, people
so like that was like a huge belief of mine during like young adulthood. It still is. Really impacts me a ton. Like when I wasn't grounded to any sort of like religion or anything, I cared about like, you know, being part of just like another species on our planet
Mm.
and like part of
Mhm.
our entire like ecosystem, whatever. So yeah, it's like I'm used to thinking of us as like animals, like we're
Mhm.
biological beings. Like
Yes.
how could I not be impacted by my biology?
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
yeah, it's
It's
ridiculous.
pretty
Anyway,
it's wild. Like, and it's almost kind of like a luxury belief because it's like, and not everyone can just like, choose to just opt into it. Just the thing that bothers me the most is just the like complete like willingness to throw away like certain like sex-based protections and just like the disrespect
yeah,
towards like our elders and the things that were like hard fought. It does. And this is why I still
yeah.
identify as a feminist, period, even though I often say in the West, I do feel like women are broadly doing better than men. I'm concerned about the state of men, like in a lot of ways.
Yeah, there's
Uh,
certain things that men have to deal with that are rough and tough, and there's certain things that women have to deal with that are rough and tough. And I think it's true on both. And like that doesn't have to cancel each other out. We don't have to be
exactly. Yeah.
hating either gender, either sex, whatever. We don't have to be like we need to prioritize this one or that one. It's like no. But I'm a like I believe not just like patriarchy but like capitalist patriarchy. Like I think it's kind of like the system. Like I don't think it's really like individual men or men as some sort of group that are like sitting around being like, oh, like we're gonna like oppress women today and tonight and we're gonna work really hard
Mhm.
at that, like because we're
Yeah,
mean
yeah.
and that's our nature. Like I don't think it's that. I think it's systemically like capitalism like pushes us to behave in certain ways, and it
Mhm.
has a certain economic system. So like a lot of the labor that's traditionally done by women,
Mhm.
which isn't always done by women, and that's fine, and it's not always what women do, and that's fine, but a lot of the labor that
That
comes,
has traditionally,
yeah,
yeah, yeah.
more naturally is like a role that women tend to fill more often. That
Mhm.
stuff's not paid, and
Mhm.
you end up dependent upon someone who's going to go out into like the more like masculine oriented or like male oriented workforce business world, and we've had to make room for women to succeed in the business world, but also like
Mhm.
women shouldn't be pushed to have to be girl
Mhm.
bosses. Like if you want to like do a bunch of domestic labor and raise your kids and like help someone else who goes out into the business world, help him be fed or her be fed
Mhm.
and be clothed and like have a clean house and raise kids or whatever it is you're doing at home, garden, buy
Yeah, yeah,
food, grow
yeah.
food, whatever you're doing at home, like have a community, then that should be like just as empowered. But the capitalist system is like, no, you're then beholden to whoever's making the money out in the
Mhm.
business world, and if they share it with you properly, great, and if they don't, then you're screwed.
Yeah. Yeah, it's
That's not
terrifying, like,
right.
yeah. I mean, I
But
always thought, like,
that's how
I
I
feel like
view patriarchy, is like it's wrapped up in the systemic motivations. It's not like some guy at night being like, I'm gonna be really patriarchal and terrible.
yeah, yeah, and I even like, I've thought that, like, because I've been deep if coming from gender ideology, sometimes I am clinging too, like, deterministic, but, like, the way I think of like patriarchy and its origins is basically the desire to control female sexuality is it at the time would have been a logical desire to ensure paternity, at the cost of, a woman's freedom, and it's not justifiable. But I see that like the biological cause to that. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
And then it's like
yeah.
filtered through other forces and cultural forces that's either like exaggerated and used to, further oppress women, or, you know, like in the United States, we've broadly, women have, more equal standing, but in other countries, it helps you understand like these countries that are so anti-woman, because it seems illogical to a certain point. They're losing out a lot of potential talent and
Controlling women, like it serves like a purpose economically, socially,
Mhm. True, yeah.
it's like
Having
men,
another, yeah.
yeah, like some it's built into some like religious aims that certain people ascribe to and others don't, even within a certain religion, like not everyone will buy into like the we should control the women kind of stuff,
Mhm.
even if they're the same religion as the next guy who does buy into that. But it's there for reasons, and I think a lot of them have to do with capitalism and money and economics and power and security and all sorts of stuff like that. So
yeah.
I
mean,
don't
it's like
know.
that. It's like those things, those two forces coming together, and that's like, at least when we look back at like the rudimentary. Because I usually, at this point, I find that I don't usually bring up like patriarchy unless I'm like talking to someone specifically like a theory like context. But at least in any time I'm talking to like a non-feminist, I just completely drop
Yeah, I
like
don't
all
use the
trigger
word
language.
patriarchy
Like,
that often.
yeah.
Usually, but I don't know. I feel like in this context, it's good to like kind of explain like if that
Well, it's a word. It's a useful
what it
word.
means
It's
to
just like,
me. It's like I think
people.
it's tied up in that. It's not tied up in people's like personalities and their individual desires. It's not some dude walking around
Exactly.
evil because of his internal like independent desires that aren't being influenced by like society. Like
And that's like a popular feminist narrative is basically that men are evil and hate you. And these things people just like fall back on, like this is just an obvious truth that men are evil and bad and all these things, and like like it's just stated without any pushback, and if you do push back on that, you're completely misrepresented. And I find the whole process just like very infuriating that there's like no level of like nuance that people can like approach this conversation at, like talking about like difference feminism, like acknowledging any biological differences. They just instantly go to like, oh, you're going to do state mandated like eugenics now and like do Handmaid's Tale. And it's like, or what drives me nuts is like when I'm talking to someone about like how biological differences matter, and they're like, I'm sorry, you feel limited by your biological differences. And it's like,
it's not limited. It's trying to understand like what, like, is there something going on with me that makes me different from an average male? Like, internally, like, are my drives and my biology and my psychology that are built into me like different in some way? And I don't think of myself as like an average super gender conforming woman, but I've come to accept that I'm a woman. I don't know. Probably maybe some of the guests don't know, but like I used to, question whether I was like, my gender identity back when I thought that was like worth my time to question. And I didn't want to be a woman, and I didn't think I necessarily was a woman because I didn't feel like I fit in. I didn't feel like I understood other like girls growing up. I couldn't communicate with them well. I couldn't socialize with them well. I had different desires of what I did with my time, and but now I'm like, I not only am I a woman, but like that means a lot, like I have certain hormones, and men tend to have like a completely different hormone profile. I have like monthly cycle, like you're supposed to be able to be empowered as a female to learn about how your monthly cycle impacts you. Like certain times you'll have more energy, certain times you'll need more calories or rest. Like you're supposed to learn all that stuff. No one freaking empowered me to understand how my body is changing every month over time. It does these, it's cyclical. No one, that's supposed to be like a empowerment thing. Like we have information about that now. And even if there's not that much science about some of it, there's a lot of different women who talk about it.
What's really annoying, there's a lot of period discourse is dominated by people have periods, and they want to really take women out of that. And that's, people act like, oh, why do you need it to say women everywhere? And it's like, what a projection that is. You're the one who's changing, the words and language that has been effectively useful for, most situations. And
that really bothers me a lot. But if someone's going to try to understand and accept their anatomy and biology and what it's doing and how it's impacting their needs and desires, then like that's good, whether they're calling themselves a woman or not. But I personally really want a lot more solidarity with women. I don't want all of us to be identifying out of it or feel ashamed to be a woman, or feel like I really refuse to be seen as a woman. I prefer not to. I feel like it plays into the thing where we stereotype a lot of the times, which I stereotyped when I was a kid, especially in high school. I was going through thinking about this. like I stereotyped women as like weak, not powerful.
Mm-hmm.
Like not, I didn't want to be
Yeah.
a woman.
You
I
didn't
was like,
want
I
to be a
wanted to
woman.
be
You wanted to be.
powerful.
I
Yeah.
always took it, even if I wouldn't admit it, when I was told, like when I was given a more masculine sounding compliment, I did take pride in that more than if I was complimented on something feminine about myself. That would feel more like an insult. And that was just, and
Yeah.
even me identifying as a feminist would still feel that
Mhm.
way. There's just always this knowledge that woman is frivolous. The interests of
Yeah.
women are
Frivolous.
frivolous.
I had this girl who lived across the street from me. I both admired her and like had contempt for her
Mm-hmm.
femininity. Like in my
Yep.
head, I don't know if I said it out loud very often, but in my head, I would call her Miss Prissy Pants. Starting in like third grade, I'd be like,
Yeah.
Miss Prissy Pants. Like, what was I doing? And she would like the Backstreet Boys and like go to dance class, and I would like go to soccer practice, and I don't know what else.
And like
Read
listen to
books.
rock,
Like,
you know, like so
read
different.
books, listen to standard radio that my parents listen. I don't know, but like it was like she was just so different, and she was so feminine that sometimes I would lapse into like feeling like I was insulting her, and other times I would feel like she was like this unattainable,
Mm,
confusing person that I could like, that she was popular, everyone was gonna like her, she's like the quintessential girl in the grade at
yeah,
school. And like if I could just like get in with her, I could get in with everyone. And other times I'd be like, she's so foreign to me and I don't like it. I think it's ridiculous. I think it's stupid. It's
right.
frivolous, like you said. And that's such a bad attitude. I wish I had
Mm,
been verbalizing that more to, I don't know who, my mom. I don't know if she would have helped a lot with that. She made one comment about how like she was like ashamed to be a cheerleader in high school. She was ashamed
mm,
that she had been a cheerleader in high school because that wasn't like girl boss enough of her. So I think she had girl
yeah,
boss feminism. Like she thought she had to be a businesswoman. So I'm not sure if
yeah,
she would have
yeah.
helped with that or not, but maybe. But I wish I had like verbalized it so someone could have told me like it's okay to be feminine. It's cool in its own
Mhm.
way. Like it's not weak, it's not frivolous, it's not stupid. You know, girly isn't like a terrible word. Like
Yeah, I
but
mean, it's just the word girl, especially in that age demographic, is literally an insult, you know,
yeah,
just on its own, stand alone. So that, you know, that kind of tells you of the
yeah.
era that we grew up in, you know. So it makes sense why we both gravitated so far away from that, but we just took some wrong messaging along the way about
Mhm.
these negative associations with femininity or something like I, and it pains me to say this, but I feel like I didn't really have a, an appropriate amount of like respect for my mother and everything she did raising us
Yeah.
until like recently. And I haven't, you know, I don't have any kids, but it didn't seem cool to me. Like it didn't seem cool to be a mom. It didn't seem like, I don't know. I felt like this, I don't want to be like that. Like that's not good enough for me. You know, I want to
Aw.
be bigger and better than, and it's like, in actuality, she built an amazing life for herself that is like, you know, in every way, she's performing better than I am now, you know, like, or at least like if we went age by age, like she has had an awesome, amazing life and had, you know, beautiful kids and is
Yeah.
really happy. So it's like, I think I had such so low self-esteem that to deal with that, I needed to like intentionally differentiate myself as like something so special that I'm just like not understood because I didn't want to be like normal. I didn't want to be like a normal mom or like suburban mom. That would be like the worst thing. And it's like now I see like that would be a very attractive life to me, you know? Like I could totally see myself getting into that. And I don't know,
Yeah,
it just felt like
I part of like turning everything a 180 on how I thought about femininity was like realizing that like caretaking and being caring and loving
mm,
and like motherly was like super amazing like talent or skill or
yeah.
behavior that like we need. Like not
Yeah.
everyone needs to do that, but like being a motherly caring person who can like caretake and guard and shelter and raise
And
someone,
be like a pillar of a
yeah,
community,
whatever
you
it
know,
is.
and a rock and a social connector and all these things that like my
Exactly.
mom and my grandma do that, like you're saying, because they were, you know, women, it's not viewed as like typical work, but they were doing all, they
but
were
it's
doing
work.
a lot.
It takes work. Yeah. You can't just like
It takes
be
work to
tired
connect a
and lay
family
there
and
and
a
do nothing
community,
and
like
it's all done. Yeah. The social connectivity, like people undervalue that. They don't realize how that's
until
both
it's
a
gone, and then
skill
they're
and
like,
work.
"Fuck, my
Yeah.
life's nothing."
Yeah. Yeah. So what else? If people don't know much about me who are watching, I after I decided to like try and reconcile with my womanhood and like re-identify as a woman and try and figure out how to love myself in that way and like value that I have feminine qualities and that vulnerability can be a strength and stuff like that. That was
Absolutely,
my key
absolutely.
phrases I used to like recover. But after that, I was still all like queer and like trans adjacent, like hung out like with the trans community and stuff like that for ages after that. And I ended up dating like a trans woman, and we got married. And then this is like the brief overview, hopefully. And then we had like a loved one who was getting super distressed about like gender politics and like their psychology and like their behavior was just like crumbling, like their stability in their life was crumbling, the way they didn't have any energy to treat anyone right anymore, like they were barely getting by. And I was like, something's wrong, like I'll try and help them, like this is really sad. And so I was like, I hadn't really wanted to look into all the gender politics and gender theory that much, other than like everyone deserves like good material reality and economic stability and social stability and respect. And like that was my gender politics. Like everyone deserves
and it's like, well, we still kind of it's still our belief. It's just now we have different info we're working with about like
I learned a lot. There's more impacts and ideas that I learned about. But yeah, I started to like, I was like, fine, I'll like bite the bullet. Like I've never wanted to do this because, you know, what if like my experience and my values with re-identifying as a woman and trying to value femininity and trying to see myself as, you know, just like a less average, like less standard traditional like feminine person and more like slightly gender non-conforming type person, like, and be like the gender conformity or like any type of like female can essentially be a woman because they're a female, and so you can be a woman. Boom. And, like that's how I got back into being like, I'm a woman. I was like, I don't have to be like any other, that doesn't mean I'm like any other woman. And like that's how I let myself back into the club. But like so
that's so important.
I was afraid that my experience of that would like make me dislike everyone else's concepts of themselves who were trans, who were like my best friends. And I was like, I'm afraid that I'm gonna start, you know, feeling sad for them for disidentifying with, you know, are they really empowered if they can't just see themselves for like a simple identity that they started with, that seems true to me, to like hold that identity if that's what they want to hold, if that's what seems true to them. So like that's where I was coming from, and I was like, fine, I'll look it up. This person needs me to help them. Like there must be a lot of other people who are really distressed about these gender politics and stuff. So I looked it up, and then the person started treating me really shitty, and I started getting angry. I was like, I hate this. I'm gonna keep looking into it more now. Like I'm even more driven. Like, why have they done a 180 from like one day, like I love you so much, to like the next day, like I have no time for you. I'm never gonna give you any time. Like I didn't really do something. I was actually compiling a care package for them that day, and I scrapped the project. It was like a community care package. I scrapped the project. It was like, well, I guess they don't want to hear from me. So like I wasn't even bugging them. I was like, you don't have time for me. Like I'm not gonna bug you. But then like whenever like something would happen, like a miscommunication, I'd be like, hey, can we like go over this miscommunication, smooth it out, you know, maybe 5 minutes? They'd be like, no, I'm just barely getting by and feeding my kids and keeping my lights on. Go away, you know? And I was like, yesterday. So I was like, something isn't right. Something is bad and wrong. So I looked all this stuff up, and I started getting the theory that like they were distressed partly because like the story that's being told culturally to them. Like, they're
Yes.
distressed partly because they're being told everyone hates you
Yep.
and all the trans people and everyone's oppressing you and you're at risk of
Mhm.
violence and people want to like have you be gone off this earth, not just like
Mhm.
not have you be trans or like have you love
Yeah, and
being a woman.
anyone who
It's like,
disagrees with
gone.
anything,
I was like,
like,
that's a
wants
lot.
you dead. Like, anyone if you disagree with
Yeah. They don't hope that you,
anyone inch.
change your mind or change your lifestyle, and, like, they don't hope that you know, love yourself in the way that they think you should love yourself. They hope that you cease to exist. I'm like,
Yeah.
that's not almost
This
no
is not
one. It's like,
reality.
come on. I was like, you're
It's just
distressed based on a story that's being told within our queer culture, not based on
Mhm.
what's actually happening to you every day. Like, no one was really coming up and like bullying them or like firing them or like
Yeah. You can do a lot of damage with the stories, like, it makes me think of when I was, like, younger and before I kind of, like, learned more about, like, my own mind and how I work, like, I tortured myself with this story that I was so defective and everyone hates me and everyone's looking at me and everyone's judging me, and this story was so real to me that, like, I had to be pulled out of
Mhm.
school, and it's like I wasn't being, at that point in my life, I wasn't being, like, attacked from all these different it was very much like these stories I was telling myself and like creating so
Aw.
much suffering. And
Yeah.
it's so unfortunate because it's like not even it's not bringing you towards anything. It's
Sometimes
not a
though,
productive
it's like,
suffering.
you know, past trauma feels like it's still happening to you. Like maybe it did
Hmm.
start rooted in reality, an old situation, and you just
Sure,
can't
yeah,
let go of
yeah.
the
I
feeling you're in that situation again, even though you're not.
Yeah,
So like
exactly,
that's how
exactly.
why people say they need to work through their trauma sometimes because they'll perceive like danger or whatever, like when it used to be a dangerous situation but now it's
Hmm.
not. But it seems like that it reminds you of that, and so you're having all these responses. So that could be like part of what it is for some people. But I'm just not convinced. Like I knew this person pretty well, and I knew a lot of trans people like really well. I was close with a lot of
Hmm.
them, and they were like struggling to keep housing, keep jobs, feed themselves, have any money. Like they were struggling with so many things, like mental health. They were struggling with like
Yeah,
leaning on substances in order to just get
yeah.
by and feel okay. Like I was just like, oh my gosh, like did anyone like how many of you have stories of like people actually personally targeting and impacting you
Hmm.
because you're trans or you're
Hmm.
gay or whatever it is? And I could think like was thinking about it, and like a lot of those people are open with me. I know some people I wouldn't know their stories and things happen to them and I don't know, but a lot of those
Yeah,
people
yeah.
are open with me, and the things that they were upset about were not the biggest. Like you can be resilient and get through those things, but like
Yeah.
everyone was saying like, you know, expect more bad stuff to happen to you. So they were all like freaking out and like
Yep.
psychologically crumbling. So I started to just be like, this isn't right. This isn't true. I started to feel really separate from the trans and queer community and just
Mm.
started to be like this is all kind of like a it's not as true as I thought, you know, and I started to really yeah.
It's a really, for me, when I started having those doubts, it felt like really lonely because it's like you're posed with a situation where you have to decide what you're going to do with your new views and how is that going to impact the people I care about. Like, and there's
Yeah.
so much at risk of like, you absolutely don't want to ever be harming anyone with your views. And it's like, how do I know, like, I'm not just, it's not some kind of
Yeah.
internalized bigotry that is like, I'm filtering. I had so many doubts, and it took me a long time before I was able to kind of like vocalize some of my more like controversial views, which aren't even that
Yeah.
crazy. But
Yeah.
that just goes to show you how rigid things are, that like I would
Yeah.
be seeming kind of like controversial for, having concerns about like same-sex prisons and things like that, that it just seems obvious to me that you can care about that without being transphobic. Like, but
Oh yeah, yeah. It's like you're not necessarily wishing ill on one person because you're thinking about the well-being of
Mhm.
another person in the same
Yeah.
like in the situation when there are two people being impacted and interacting with each other, and like everyone thinking that you are. It's like, oh, like I don't know. It just seems so like self-centered, and I didn't realize how self-centered like I was being and all the people around me were being. We were being like,
Yeah.
queer needs are the number one needs. We
Yeah,
are the
like, of
ones
all
to
the
be
fucking
focused
things
on.
going on.
And
Yeah, like,
and it's like, bro, like a lot of different types of people have a lot of different needs for a lot of different reasons, and we got to like kind of think about all of them. You can't just say like, you know, this one group and this one characteristic is like the top priority at all times.
yeah, and it always goes to identity without regard to circumstance, you know? Like, I know poor white men who struggled with health issues and mental illness and loss and all
Yeah.
these things, and they would have
Yeah.
to still defer to the Ivy League educated trans person of color, you know? Like,
Yeah.
no
Yeah.
matter what the
If we're
topic,
looking
like,
for
you are the
solidarity,
oppressor. Like,
yeah, if we're looking for solidarity, you don't like, you know, throw out all the white men and say like you're not part of it, you know, and then
yeah.
achieve like some sort of cultural revolution that like we all live communally and support one another, and you know, we're no longer dependent on capitalism or whatever someone's goal is. You don't throw the
The
white
thing is,
men
it's not, they
out
don't
and
care.
then achieve
I
that.
just, people clearly don't care about the outcomes of their activism. It's almost completely a self-serving process. It gives you an identity, a community, an aesthetic, a look. It gives you a way to feel superior. It's giving you all these things that you don't even think about what the fuck you're even actually doing and how that's impacting the communities you say you care about. And from what I've seen, it seems like a lot of the ideology is actually hurting trans people. It's putting a lot of harmful narratives in their head. They're very self-defeating, very it's a very victim just like, I don't know, this like hierarchy of being a victim is so, it's such a toxic way to organize. There's just
and it's like
anywhere.
encouraging people to worry about themselves first because now they think they're the biggest victim of society. It's like, I don't think that was what you meant to end up doing with your life. Like you wanted, you know, you wanted like whatever you wanted, like communism, or you wanted you know, like a healthy community even under capitalism, or whatever it is they wanted when they started out, and then they end up being like, now I'm concerned primarily about me and other people who are exactly like me because we are suffering. And it's like, no.
It's just not
like, aren't we all suffering under capitalism if that's your thing, you know?
And also just the suffering of like, first off, being a person is suffering. We need to first track this whole,
aren't we all
suffering? We need to like shift the conversation around suffering period to like this constant seeking out immediate comfort, immediate safety. You know, we should really be encouraging people to do the opposite of that, to push yourself, you know, to expose yourself to challenging ideas, you know, to show how your ideas hold up to them. Like, the devaluing of these things has really put, you know, the progressive community, the feminist community in a bad spot culturally. And I feel the backlash. I don't know if you like, it feels like it's only getting more so, it's getting more so common to have just full anti-LGBT blanket, you know. The conservatives are ready to throw out the whole fucking thing. They're like, you know, we're fuck all LGBTQ. They're done, you know.
So funny is I did an interview on Benjamin Boyce's channel, and while I was talking to him, I was concerned that he and I were going to feel completely at odds with each other because I like the word Marxism. I like the theory. I like the information and the knowledge, the analysis. I like that. It's very interesting. It helps me think.
Absolutely.
Helps me understand the world. Whether or not there's some model of how we're going to live that's based entirely on Marxism in my mind, I don't know, but I love that. And he has spent a lot of time, you know, vilifying the word Marxism and what he thinks that is. And he's like, oh man, that's, you know, terrible for society. And he's essentially like pretty conservative type of person, like family values, like, you know, good guy. He's trying to do right by his family and the world, whatever. But I was like, he's not gonna, like, we're not gonna relate. We're gonna feel at odds. We're gonna be disconnected, because I wanted to like bring that into the conversation at least a little bit, to let him know about myself. And like, he was interviewing me about me and my story and my thoughts. So
that's part of
like,
it.
you know, that's a huge chunk of what I think. So or how I think. And it's part of how I became grounded in material reality is through Marxism. It's about material reality. It's about materialism. So anyway, um, but but it wound up sort of being that he actually has this value that he thinks of as deeply conservative, that's sort of about like having a good community and being good to each other, you know? Like
Yeah.
home life, community life, be good to each other. And maybe he thinks more about the nuclear family and the one household than he does about
Mm.
like a village type amount of
Yeah,
people.
yeah.
Maybe. I don't know. But I think so though. But it was kind of like we could connect over that. Both of us being individualistic and being selfish, which I think are encouraged by capitalism. He probably doesn't want to like talk, you know, he's probably like,
Yeah.
whatever, that sounds stupid. You know, who knows though.
Yeah. Or
But
he'll be like, that's good. That's the other kind of response that is like, oh, well, that's
but
greed is good.
no,
Greed is good.
I think he was more like, we have a responsibility to one another. You know, like we need to be good to one another. We need to make at least a family unit function and take each other into account, be self-sacrificing. I think he's Christian, some level amount of Christianity. He's like, we need to be self-sacrificing and put other people's needs, you know, high up on our list of what we value and that kind of stuff. And I was like, dude, like, I think I'm on the far left. Like, I love, you know, thinking about Marxist analysis of the world, and you think you're conservative and Christian and family values, but like we're both trying to essentially make like a healthy community happen and not be
Yeah.
individualistic. Like there's a different dichotomy we don't
There's
talk
that
about,
collective.
being individualistic and selfish versus being like community-based,
Collectivistic.
selfless. Yeah. And
Yeah.
I'm like, I like now I get how I can like connect with conservatives, and we don't
Yeah.
have completely diametrically opposed goals for how people behave and how society works, even though I might say
No,
like
yeah.
Karl Marx wrote some cool stuff. Like
I mean,
that
your
was
best
very
kind of
interesting, you know?
conservative would say the same thing. It's like a really, there are like some conservative and right-wing intellectuals, and the ones who are worth their salt have actually read leftist theory and can tell you the things that are good about it, you know, like.
Yeah, there's just a lot of demonizing of it and misunderstanding of it
Yeah.
lately. It's because people are misrepresenting it, saying they believe in it, and then their actions and words are not lining up with like believing in it. So
Yeah, and it's
they
all it's
think they
gotten
are.
blurred in with like wokeism and just basically everything on the left that people don't like is Marxist.
Yeah, yeah. It's like,
Or like,
but you know,
or they think it means like equality of outcome and like quotas and they you know, this kind of like rudimentary
it can mean a
views.
lot of different things to a lot of
Yeah.
different people. Not everyone interprets it the same, but I do think like identity politics and idealism and like being disconnected from material reality, including like biology and sex differences, is like anti-Marxist, anti-leftist. Like that's
Yeah.
not true leftism. That's kind of
Yeah.
diametrically opposed, kind of works against it. So like that's my thing, but there's all these guys, including Benjamin Boyce, who kind of don't see it that way, and they kind of like mush it all together because there's so many people out there being like, identity politics, like gender is some floating theory that like has nothing to do with my body. Any gender could be mine, and it's like doesn't have any relation with my body. It's like, and then they're like, yeah, I'm Marxist and I'm communist, and it's like confusing people. And I think you're confused yourself. Like that's not quite on the mark of what it, you know, you're not describing it right. And so you get people like Benjamin Boyce who are like, oh, I'm conservative, and this Marxism,
he's just maybe like a classical liberal with like who like values community. Like I always thought of him as more like the classic liberal centrist, but he does have that audience. He does have that audience that like really is not necessarily open to feminism or really anything that the left has to offer, because they just happen to come up in this cultural moment where the left has dominated culturally and has become the mainstream. And I feel like part of a root of like how I operate, and I'm trying to work on this, is I'm just very contrarian. Like, so I think that's I'm trying to control my impulse to just like rebel from the left because it became so, all encompassing in every arena of society, and that made me want to rebel. But now that I see the backlash, I feel like I'm going to want to rebel back into like justifying leftist ideas and, because it's, and when I go into like a lot of like arguments and debates now, I just feel like I'm batting for everyone. Like I'm arguing for one side 1 second,
Don't
and then
insult
the other side the other second. Like
don't insult gay people. Don't insult straight people.
I know. Like people don't know what to do with it. They're like, what? Like, and it's kind of fun, like surprising people, and it makes me feel like, all right, hopefully this means I'm making like some kind of progress, and that like my values aren't lining up perfectly with any ideology. I don't think there's any ideology that is the solution of reality, and things that I used to be more inclined to believe before. I think I'm just at a point where I don't need that like safety blanket. I don't need that certainty. Like I've done a lot of work on myself to just be okay, like with uncertainty, with okay with dealing with uncomfortable, emotions and truths, and it's definitely been a process for me though, coming to the point where I could speak on things confidently, and even still I'll speak confidently with the trying to stay open to always receiving new info and having my mind changed.
It's really hard. Like I admire, like it sounds like I'm I admire you, which by saying this it sounds like I'm saying I admire myself as well, but whatever. For being
you should admire yourself, like
for being sort of biological essentialist as a woman, because that has been used to like oppress us, limit us, make us not be able to make money, make us not be able to make our own decisions, make us subservient. That has been used in that way for decades, if not centuries, if not like millennia. Like and so like being able to do that nowadays, well, first off, that's a privilege that we can be comfortable enough as women to be able to try and figure out like what's the material reality, what's is there some truth to evolutionary psychology and like biological essentialism and sex differences, versus being in this defensive or reactionary position where everything feels like it's against us and limiting us so much that we don't want to admit any of that's true, even if it was, or we're not open to that being true because it scares us and that's what's used against us. So
it's like a strategic choice we make to like not go there. And that probably made sense at certain points of history, because I was thinking about that too. Like it is very specific to this time, to us, to like our backgrounds and where we live, that we can like talk about this without having that worry of our rights going to start getting like fully peeled back based on us admitting that there are biological differences, like, so it makes you want to add like a bunch of caveats to things so that people don't misconstrue you, but that's going to happen no matter what. So
oh boy. But I said I was going to ask you about like your timeline, like how long have you been trying to expose yourself to all these new ideas and be less like ideologically rigid and stuff?
I feel like it's something I always thought I did. Like I thought I was like that.
But of course we all want to think the best of ourselves.
Like I thought I believed that I was doing research by like Googling things and checking, but I was just really trusting resources that now I know not to trust. I was trusting those like mainstream like liberal establishment, like like, I mean, I still trust them to a degree, like New York Times, Washington Post, like they're still respected to a degree, but the fact that they've published such like obvious like falsehoods repeatedly, but anyway, I used to like
to gender type stuff, or just related to
gender, and a lot of just like narratives of around like identity politics and groups, and profiting on like stoking resentment between groups, stoking like racial resentments to like I feel like that's a lot of those, like for example there's like the Michael Brown case,
I know a lot about that.
Turned out being completely different than how I believed, and that's just one of many
I was
examples.
Actually about to watch that documentary. The podcast Hetero Dorks had me on, Nina Paley and Corey Cohn, And they're one of their more recent episodes. They're about to release mine soon, we hope. They said I'm next. But one of their more recent episodes is a documentarian person, and I think it was a guy. I didn't listen to it yet, but his documentary, one of his big ones, was like, "Who Killed Michael Brown?" And it's supposed to be sort of looking into like what was there any spin put on the story, like culturally, did we believe something? So I was about to watch that actually soon. That's on my list for like this week. So I don't think I remember watching that ever. So
it's really mind-blowing how differently I thought that case went down to what the actual evidence suggests, and what, you know, the Obama administration had a separate DOJ investigation into that case and concluded that Darren Wilson, the officer, was innocent. You know, there's a reason why he wasn't incarcerated, even though that was during a time when we were starting to see more consequences for abuses of power. And it's annoying because it's like those things exist and they happen, but they aren't happening in this super racialized way. It's more in like a class way. It's more about in a mental illness way. And I mean, there's always going to be
I know a lot about St. Louis, and St. Louis is a super special place for its racial segregation and racial history. The north part of St. Louis is like probably like 80% Black in the majority of it, and the south part of St. Louis is probably like, you know, 70-80% white in the majority of it. So like it's really bad still. And you know, there was a lot of like white flight, all sorts of stuff. I read this book, The Broken Heart of America. It's super good. It also, that guy I think is partial to, you know, Marxist communist analysis of stuff and thinking about economics and interplay with economics and racism, but he really is just trying to dig into the history and tell us all about it. I don't know. I don't think he was telling us like biased, like spun stories. I think he was really just uncovering detailed history about St. Louis and in relation to economics and stuff. And it's a huge problem. So it's very segregated to this day. And there are a lot of neighborhoods that are just like economically disadvantaged, like because they've been disinvested in. Like,
absolutely.
The government stopped putting money into those neighborhoods. And so, that's
another reason why I feel strongly about, like, I think of the Michael Brown case again, because like after a lot of communities were further like impacted through like the rioting, fires, businesses fleeing, and it's had like, you know, now a decade of impact, and there has been like a bounce back from that. So it's like these narratives are so powerful to incite these reactions. And to think that it was all, you know, based on like a mistruth or a misrepresentation. So those were like, I'd say around 2019 to 2020 was when I really took, the fucking lid blew off. And I was like, for the first time, I think I had also for a long time been listening to right-wing podcasts, or like, not even right-wing, like, you know, just things that were like seemed right-wing, like Jordan Peterson, or like, you know, even
he was like canceled out of my life. I wouldn't listen to Jordan Peterson at all. Like canceled, he was like before I even tried it.
I literally
don't listen to that guy.
But I like challenged myself to listen to him and like other people to kind of pick out things to criticize about them and like make content. Like I was making kind of more social justice-y content anyway. So I was like, but I found myself like enjoying these different perspectives and realizing that there were certain things they were saying that made sense, and like, and I kept trying to like reject it and like joke about it or push it down, and ultimately I just kind of like let go and let myself believe, like, to trust my perception more. You know, like and then I just did a lot of research, and a lot of it was centered around like gender ideology and sex differences and the sports issue, because that was one of the first things that I had like a specific break off with like my broader community about. But since it was the pandemic, I didn't ever go through any kind of like canceling, and I didn't, you know, on my IRL accounts, I just don't really engage that much with them in that way.
Yeah, mine's still pretty separate. There's like the broader queer community. I used to be pretty embedded in it like before the pandemic. And then I already was really limiting my social life a ton. I was going through some health stuff and just I don't know, stuff, and so I was already, you know, fairly separate, but I assumed I was gonna slide back into like the swing of things eventually when I felt up for it with my health condition and stuff, and like go back to being just like super wrapped up in the most radical part of the queer community here, like the queerest, most radical, most left, most protesty, most whatever, you know, like creative drag show stuff, which is, you know, that's cool still, but in its own, I don't know, like there's a lot to be discussed there, but you know, creativity and expression, like that shit's still cool, but like I haven't like slid back into all of that, because when I go to those spaces I feel like I need to think what they want me to think, and they're gonna hate me otherwise. They're gonna literally be like, you're oppressing us, you're oppressing me, you're oppressing my friends because of your thoughts and your words.
It's not being as enjoyable to be around people like that, and then you end up further alienating and fracturing what could have been potential allies and people working together for like some common good. And it's sad.
Yeah, I have a lot of empathy and compassion if people were open to me, you know, having different views and thoughts and ideas than them. You know, I wouldn't be, if I was sitting around with them and we disagreed, I wouldn't be like bullying them or trying to hurt them. You know, I have a lot of, like, I'm super empathetic, super compassionate. So like it's people thinking that someone who disagrees with them is like the boogeyman who's evil, who's going to hurt them, like rather than engaging with that person and being like, how can we come to some sort of agreement on what to do next that doesn't hurt me and also doesn't hurt you, you know, like no one's doing that. Very few people are doing that. Most people are like, oh, she was canceled out of my life because she doesn't go to Palestine protests or whatever. Like, she,
you know, it could be anything
anymore, so she's canceled out of my life.
It's really sad, and it's like it makes you realize, like, wow, I don't necessarily want this to be my primary community anymore. If it's not reflecting, you just have to realize sometimes that you've grown out of a certain group of people. And luckily for me, I've had a lot of friends over the years who've kind of grown up with me, and our views have like evolved together, and like they, even if they have more left wing typical or LGBT typical views, they still, I can talk to them and they know I'm not evil, and that's so valuable. And like I think that's such a critical component. Really is like,
I'm hoping that'll work out for me. I'm like, you know, I was scared to be in touch with most people who are super judgmental in that way towards people they're not as close with, because so I'm like being a flake with like almost everyone, because I like don't want them to like be like, oh, now I know what you think and I hate you. Right. And I'll be like, you loved me yesterday and for the past 20 years, and we were super close, and we always had the same goals and desires, and we have so many deep conversations under our belt, and you know who I am. But okay, cool, you found out I have a new idea in my head, and now you literally hate me, even though I'm not even trying to stick to ideas like super rigidly or like closed off to like changing back or changing again.
It's so non-reality based and just unfortunate. But I found what I've done to like talk to people who I'm not sure how they're going to react is I'll frame it kind of like, hey, like I'm actually kind of scared to say this, but like I do think maybe I can tell you about how I'm having some thoughts and like views that are like pretty against what a lot of our friends believe, and you know, and kind of frame it as like, what am I like? Can I just tell you this thought, and like keep yourself kind of removed and detached from the thought, and like maybe play up your suspicion towards the thought has been kind of like a safe way for me to see where people are at. And I feel like a lot of people are willing to like meet you in the middle ground, especially for like, and this doesn't work on the internet or text, it would have to be like in person, because anything on like
you can't get people to compromise and be kind on the internet. What?
Yeah, it doesn't hit the same. It does not go over as well, unfortunately.
Oh,
But
yeah. You know, there's like fear of like the wrong person, you know, cluing into my ideas and opinions changing in the wrong way, like, and then just deciding to tell everyone, and they all, you know, wish the worst for me from then on, regardless of how much they do about it, you know, just that would be really sad. So
yeah.
I don't know which person is going to be that person. I'm like afraid of everyone.
Mhm. Yeah, well, I think I feel like any friends I have who I don't consider them my primary like community anymore, because I think also as we get older, like our social lives can kind of like narrow down a bit. Like I'm not going to parties every weekend. Like, sometimes I do, but I tend to just not bring up these topics in those more casual like group circumstances,
Yeah.
And I feel like committed to like telling the truth though if I am like asked about a topic or if I feel strongly about something. Like
Yeah,
that's been
no,
kind of like my
I
goal.
can't, I'm so bad at lying, first off.
Yeah.
Hate it, and I just don't want to. But
Yeah,
I also don't want to hurt people. I hate that
exactly.
too. And I don't want to be misunderstood. I actually have
Mhm.
like a trauma response about being misunderstood, and I'll
Yeah.
start like freaking out and like over explaining repeatedly and then being like, "Are you okay? Is
Yes.
everything
Oh,
okay?" Like
no.
I try not to do that. So I don't want to be in that situation. I'm like, "No, I hate
And it's
this."
like those are the options, I guess, unfortunately. So
Yeah.
I mean, I do think
And I
even a
get
lot of
really
people on the left
emotional, and
are
that's
like,
exhausting.
I think broadly wokeness is falling out of fashion. I feel culturally like it's not, people are seeing that toxicity that goes along with it and they're trying to step back from
Possibly.
it. And like, you're seeing like people on the left make more like edgy jokes and not get as like dragged for it. And I noticed little things like that that make me think that maybe we're moving forward, but it
Yeah.
also seems maybe like it's concentrate on one side. Maybe I'm creating my own new bubble of like anti-woke people on the
That's what
left,
I like. I wonder. I can't really tell, about broader societal like trends because I switched all my echo chambers to try and have more variety of people and more heterodox people, and so it's like,
Same.
how would I know? How would I know?
Yeah, true. My timeline is like pretty crazy now because I love my favorite kinds of people to follow are like a Republican trans woman or someone who's just like so like not conventional. You just know that they probably are going to have some kind of like interesting perspective or story.
Mhm.
But that makes for an interesting timeline. But I do worry about
Yeah.
like there's something that doesn't feel cool to me either about being like anti or like complaining about wokeness. Like I don't want to be in that path. I just feel like it does kind of summarize a lot of my issues. Not really sure
Yeah.
what to do about
Yeah. I feel like a lot of people will like roll their eyes if I complain about wokeness. And
Yeah.
those are the people that I would like to get through to and have interesting conversations about it with. So it's hard,
Yeah, yeah.
but I have like my safe space where I don't have my like personal uh like friends and acquaintances on my new Twitter because I made a whole new, I didn't really use Twitter before anyway, right? But like I had
Mhm.
a account, but I didn't really use it. But like I made a new one because I was like, I want to see what people are saying. So I'm going to follow all these crazy accounts that are so not me and
Yeah,
like
yeah.
read it all and get my mind blown. And that's what I did. And then I started being like, I'll stay here, start tweeting,
Yeah,
people out there I
right.
could connect with. And so I didn't like just throw like 100+ of my like personal friends and acquaintances onto that account. So it's kind of like a safe space. They haven't like found me and been like, I hate you, or like you're interesting. What
Yeah.
your reaction's gonna be. So I don't know. I forgot what I was responding to that you said, but
I mean, I've been like jumping literally all over the place. Like I used to never like smoke weed before live streams for this reason, literally. Because I have like already I'm so like, a very disorganized style of talking. So then you add weed on top of it, and it's just like so much more likely for me to trail off and get completely lost in it.
Yeah.
But I was curious, talking about like bring it back to sex differences. You have had a really interesting experience seeing Ray like transition, or not. I don't know if you met Ray as a trans woman, and then he detransitioned. What were like the behavioral notice? Did you notice behavioral changes in the like testosterone? Like, was that very apparent for you, or was it so gradual? Like, what was that like?
Let me do a brief catch up first on my story for anyone who didn't watch the previous stream or like anything like that. So I was like super in the queer trans like radical left community, like communist activism, all that, like literally communist queer activism. We had a group that was like working on like queer rights, like queer workers' rights.
Nice.
And I like met Rachel while I was living that way. Those were my friends, and so we dated, we got married. We moved in together. We kind of U-hauled it. Like I know Rachel is a male, but like was sort of living, you know, less male typical lifestyle, trying to, you know, be like a trans woman, like trying to figure out like the most authentic experience of being sort of like woman adjacent. Like he didn't really claim to be like a woman. He was more like, I'm non-binary trans femme and stuff like that, and like sometimes would shorten it to like, I'm trans or I'm a trans woman. And used she, her, and Rachel and all that, and like pretty stereotypically like feminine appearance overall, or feminine queer appearance. So he was kind of doing that sort of like, I'm living as if I'm a woman as much as possible sort of thing. But he also knew he wasn't like raised like as a girl, and so like missed out on a lot of experience. And he learned that like living with me, like I would be like, you know, my mom would tell me I had to, you know, do this thing with my clothes that was really complicated, or I had to groom myself in this way, I had this pressure to look this way, I had to like wear a dress to church, like all these different things that like I didn't like, whatever they were. Those all sounded really superficial, but whatever they were, being a girl, I didn't like how I was being like treated, and the pressure to do certain things and whatnot. And he would be like, yeah, I grew up as like a guy, so I'm just learning this stuff by listening to you. And like, so he knew he wasn't a woman, but he was living as close to woman typical as he could. So he was sort of interested in sort of conceptualizing our relationship sort of sapphically, and so we did like say like, oh, we U-hauled it and stuff, which is like a lesbian typical you know experience, but we really did like
complex, like those feelings. And like we touched on it briefly on the last year. Remember you said something like even the way they smell changed, like from changing of like the hormones. So it's like an interesting, you got a front row view to like how the hormones influence.
So on the estrogen, so he was on spironolactone, which is testosterone like blocker or whatever, and then like pretty large amount of estrogen supplements, and which ultimately both of those are very serious and very big risks to your health. So if anyone who's watching is taking those or considering taking those, you need to like triple check with your doctor. Like, are there any concerns? If your doctor's just saying, la, it's fine. Those two things plus one other medicine that was documented in his chart that the doctors knew about combined to send him to the hospital and nearly die. So take those seriously. I'm not here to tell everyone what to do with their life, but it's not a lighthearted la thing to take those hormones. That's a very serious risk to your health if you don't pay attention to what you're doing and do it right and check on your levels and don't smoke and do all the things. Okay, anyway, but so he was doing those, so like it was different. Like skin is soft, like genital area changes, like, and estrogen and lack of or very low level of testosterone does change like the drives, the motivations. It changes like libido. It changes like a lot of things though. And like there's like stereotypical like normal like physical things like fat distribution, blah blah blah. But those aren't like the most like I also felt like just a male who's on the female typical hormone profile in terms of testosterone and estrogen, which side note, people don't care. People don't care that the other hormones that females have are not, supplemented in trans women. But anyway,
Yeah.
so it's still a different hormone profile. but and they're not supplemented in a way that like mimics the cycle with like the 3 or 4 different.
Oh yeah, I didn't even think about because our hormones are constantly
it's not the same.
adapting and stuff. Like
yeah, we have like follicle stimulating hormone, luteinizing hormone, progesterone, and estrogen, and they're all like you can look up like a graph of how they rise and fall and when your period is and stuff like that, and they're all like on a graph differently, and like that's not happening. We're not completely imitating a female hormone profile for these males that are going on these hormones. It's not like a one-to-one, like you're not completely. So anyway, people don't value that and talk about that enough. I think it's important to keep in mind that that's reality.
Sorry, I just have to plug my laptop in real quick.
And then if there are males who are transitioning, who are concerned about their medical care and concerned about trying to have a more female typical experience in their life, like like why aren't they talking about like like, oh, what do these other hormones do and why am I not taking them, and what are those even made as a supplement, and like no one talks about that anyway. All right, but anyway, so yeah, the hormones, I think it changes like it has like an impact on psychology and behavior. Like there's all sorts of stories, like the males who start their estrogen are like, I cried for the first time in 10 years, or like I don't know why I cried. And it sounds like I might be like, if people who haven't sort of accepted that emotions are not weak and stuff, it might sound to them like I'm making fun of women and being like, oh, they're so emotional and weak, but like it's just something I've just learned to accept, is like estrogen and stuff is like giving us a tendency towards more emotions, like
and we experience the emotions like differently, and for the men some emotions are like testosterone enhances anger, which is an emotion. It's like it impacts everything. It's so different.
Yeah, they have to deal with like this potential to be more like reactive and angry. Like, you gotta like control different urges when you're male-bodied with male typical hormones. Like, they have like this sex drive. Usually have this really strong sex drive, like potentially distracting them, potentially like motivating them a whole lot more than my sex drive motivates me, because
and that's important too, just like
it's not as distracting for me, like I'm not struggling to like keep it
and women we act like we're so virtuous sometimes, like for not dealing with the for not being as lusty as men, and it's really not.
Their bodies
we just experience
that means their brain is different. It's getting different signals in it.
So it's easy for me to resist, like if I see like a woman in a bikini on a sign, that's not influencing me in a crazy way, but like from the male, like especially because males tend to be more visually oriented, so much like advertising is manipulating them, especially like I
don't want to say like males don't have a responsibility to be good people and like try their best and stuff, but like I just want to recognize that like internally they're having a different experience than I am internally, and so Ray being Rachel and being on those medicines, changing the testosterone level to female typical and the estrogen level to female typical, it's like a very big difference, and then detransitioning. So as part of our, Ray was mature and open enough to look into everything too, and wound up deciding to detransition. He identifies as an autogynephile and is trying to work on like what that means for him and how he wants to express it. But he realized that he didn't feel like he was essentially like a woman, and didn't feel like he needed to live full time as a woman, and wanted to be like, you know what, I'm a man, I'm a male, and I'm a man, and I want to learn to value that and incorporate, you know, whatever like sex drive urges, whatever is going on in his body and his brain. Like he wants to learn how to incorporate it all in a healthy lifestyle, and as much as he can about himself, and then behave according to, you know, good ethics and values, and reality-based thoughts, like trying to recognize how he impacts people, and trying to recognize like the truth of his body and the truth of his psychology and the truth of his motivations and desires. And so that's kind of his story. So I was here and we were married and we live in a house together. It's just the two of us and our like pets and stuff. And and we're together like all the time. Like he works from home and I don't work like a traditional 9 to 5. So I'm often home as well. And we talk a ton, and we're like each other's best friend. We'll do a lot of activities together. Even when we're not home, we're often like going somewhere together. So it's like 100% a window into the experience he had of like changing his hormone profile completely back to male typical. He went he went cold turkey. I was so scared for him. I was like, you need to ask your doctor. He went cold turkey off the testosterone blocker and the estrogen. Like one day he was just like, I'm not going to take those anymore. And he wasn't even considering socially detransitioning. At first he was like, I don't think I need to be on those. They're like medically kind of serious, and like I want to try like letting my body do what it does, and sort of like dealing with that and accepting it and loving it.
And still like presenting
he was still gonna be like Rachel for the time being. And then maybe like a month or two later, he was just one day like, I'm gonna socially detransition. And I was like, what? Okay, that's cool. Let's get into that. What are we gonna do? You know? So I'm like the first person he tells most of these, probably everything along those lines too, and discusses it with and checks in with. But you know, he's his own person, makes his own decisions, of course, but he'll, you know, check everything with me. Like, how does this impact you? What do you think? Let's talk about it. Do you have any interesting thoughts? You know, do you have any input that would make me, you know, like, can you help me reason through if this is the right decision? Like, we do all those conversations. I was there for his hormonal change, and I was there for his social change, like completely 100% of the way. So like people who are like, oh, there's no sex differences, and also like testosterone doesn't matter, and also like trans women are essentially just men. I'm like, well, okay, but like whatever, they're men, like do that, say that, whatever, that's your thing. You know, have at it. I'm not mad at the people who say that anymore, because I'm not ideologically rigid, but they're feminized men with female typical hormones, which changes their psychology and their like physiology and their smell, their pheromones. That's what you're probably going to ask me about. Like, I fell in love with someone who had female typical like pheromones. Like,
smell is such a huge part of humans mating and what we find attractive. You know, there's so much, there's just literal messages being sent back and forth between us, like communicating things about our fertility and who knows the fuck what, you know.
So I thought I was like pansexual and stuff. So his detransition, we weren't like that worried about like me and our relationship and my like attraction. But like his libido has gone up. His testosterone levels actually went to like, he doesn't mind if I talk about this stuff. He talks about it openly online. But his testosterone levels went to like a low level of male typical, because he didn't have a surgery done. So he still had all the everything like which could come back online and be capable of being like a standard male body that like he had started with. But it came back online in enough, like to enough degree where like he was just barely at like the healthy for whatever male of whatever age like level, but not anywhere near the healthy or typical for like his age, and not anywhere near like average for his age or whatever. So it was like, yeah, he has like a dude level of testosterone now, but like it's like later on he went on Clomid and his T has gone up since then. So I've watched like a third phase of his hormones with the testosterone going up, and his like sex drive, like when it went up the first time, his sex drive went up the first time, and his like psychology changed and stuff. Like it was like a whole massive experience to go through with him, like watch him, you know, deal with that. But then his sex drive went up again because his testosterone went up again pretty rapidly that time too. And so even more dealing with like AGP sex drive, which if anyone doesn't know is like autosexual and like a desire usually to be like see oneself as like feminized in some way, in like sort of like a kinky way. And it's like an urge or desire that like most people who have it just can't shake it. It doesn't mean they have it, they just can't shake it. Like so they have to figure out how to, you know, either repress or integrate or transition or shut your sex drive off by using the hormones to shut it down. Like there's all sorts of strategies, but cross dress on the weekends, find other kinky people, all sorts of strategies. But so he's got like stronger AGP desires now, like so much. Like it's like I just have to like be loving and kind about how like that's a motivator. And like he didn't say like today I'm gonna have AGP desires, I chose it and that's on my to-do list, that's what I want to do. It's just inside, he's just sitting there being like, I'm distracted by this is what my body and brain keep telling me I want to do. It's like a sex drive, like a distracting potentially distracting level of sex drive. And I just have to be like, bro, like, you know, how are we going to deal with this? How are you going to deal with this? What do we have a healthy, good life now with our new values and our new, like, you're presenting as a man, you want to be seen as a man, but you also have this desire to be feminized in a way that like you find like sexual. Like, how are you going to handle all of it? Yeah. But he cares about me so much. Like he will be so compassionate and considerate about everything. Like people probably think that AGPs are usually or always like you know, really self-centered about it, but he is not. So I don't know.
Well, there's a lot of diversity in how AGP expresses in people. Like I've met a lot of trans people, some who I suspect, you know, that's like a motivation behind it, and a lot of them were like very sensitive and kind, and not the stereotype. I think it's just kind of, there is unfortunately a subset of people who have AGP who also have other like paraphilic or like antisocial like sex desires.
There's all sorts
it's linked.
But
and
also
it says like nothing about like the majority of people who have that, you know.
And people, you know, demonizing it and telling them they're bad for it and they need to repress it, or saying you need to transition and then demand your rights loudly as a trans woman and take up space and live your true life and like forget to be considerate to the people around you. Those are terrible messages for someone who's trying to like moderate their lifestyle and be kind to people around them and yet not hate yourself or whatever. So it's a lot of reactive people. A lot of people are just reacting to these terrible messages or feeling shame about having AGP desires or whatever it is. They're not wanting to admit it or not wanting to admit it to themselves, you know. So a lot of the like bad behavior is, you know, like we can help fix it as non-AGP people by treating them differently and talking about it differently and making space for, you know, good behavior that is not like socially negligent towards others.
That's why I try to like as much as I can like try to be an example, you know, a way for feminists to like have frank discussions around male sexuality, around AGP, the desire to transition. And I'm still like on the boat of like, I think everyone's experience is just so personal to them, and I don't understand like transition and what exactly that how much that gives true happiness to someone. But at a certain point, I do kind of have to take their word for it. If there's someone who feels like they're going to, like, literally going to kill themselves, and that's the only way they can cope with it, you know, I still am of the belief that people can transition and live happily in that life. And I'll use whatever pronouns. That's kind of just been my stance. But it's treacherous territory when regret comes into the picture, and when trans healthcare is it's shitty, it's terrible,
It's such
it's
a risk
incompetent,
to
it's
your life. Like, if you're going to medically transition, it's not a joke, it's not lighthearted, you know? And then also
no,
socially transitioning, also not a joke, also not lighthearted, because there are a lot of people around you that it impacts, and it's so hard to feel as like personally distressed and personally like I'm going to put myself out there and take a risk and tell people that I'm distressed over my gender, and then I'm going to take a risk by radically changing my life, and then
mm,
also think about the people around you. So
yeah,
that's extremely hard for people. So when they're transitioning, it's more common for someone to, you know, like put their needs first as a trans person, and, you know, not realize that they're impacting people around them in ways that might be difficult for the people around them. And
yeah,
so it's like we need these messages out there, because like
yeah,
it's not a joke, it's not easy, it's not
hmm,
silly. Don't do and undo it all the time. That's a difficult life, you know?
yeah.
Oh god. Anyway.
Especially like on TikTok, it's very common for Gen Z to be very frivolous in how they talk about these medical procedures, about like going on hormone therapy, getting top surgery, or, you know, reverse, like getting like bottom surgery. Everything I've seen, especially about like bottom surgery, it seems like a lot of people are being sold kind of a false expectation about what these surgeries can do, the technology that we have. You know, I think these
Yeah.
surgeons, they need to be blunt. Like, I can help you approximate this look,
Yeah.
but you will still be identified as your biological sex by people every day, everywhere you go. Like, that needs to be known, that it's most trans people
Yeah.
are going to struggle to pass as cis people if that's their goal.
Mhm, mhm.
And
Yeah, there are
that's an
some,
important part
like,
of it.
people who are living as trans women that I know right now who, you know, who I know personally, not just, like, they're not, like, internet figures, or they don't, like,
Yeah.
talk about it on the internet. And it's like, you know, their idea of what it's gonna be like going into it is sort of idealistic, and that's
Mhm.
because that's a culturally mediated idealism, being like, "Yeah,
Yeah.
it's gonna be great, like, you know, so easy, like you're gonna pass, like just do this and that, and you're gonna pass, and it's gonna feel so good, you'll be your true self." And some of them are like, bro, this is so hard, you know, like they don't want to like tell
Mhm.
everyone all the time, like, this is so hard, I wish I, you know, knew more what it was going to be like beforehand, and like how people were
Mhm.
going to see me and treat me, and like how hard it would be to pass and stuff. But like they don't want to tell everyone that and like be like heterodox necessarily. They don't want to get like pushed
Mhm.
out of social circles or make people
Yeah.
upset, or you know, they don't want to like blast their personal business and thoughts everywhere. But like some people, you know, they're working their hardest to try and like blend in and pass as
Mhm.
if they're biologically female, just so that people don't look at them funny and treat them different or think of them differently.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
they're struggling like every day, like it's like consuming their thoughts, it's consuming
Yeah, yeah.
their money, their time, their energy, and they're just struggling with it, and they're not necessarily happy with, you know, how well it's going. And some of them will say like, you know, I didn't get the message that this would be so hard, I didn't understand
Mhm.
that it might be continue to be distressing instead of just resolve all my distress. Like the idea is
Yeah.
like, I have gender dysphoria, I'm going to transition and resolve it and feel better. That's
Yeah, and
not
like
how it
transition, it
goes
makes it
for
sound
most
like it's
people.
something is done
It's
after.
not like a
Like
magical, yeah.
you just like become this other thing. And young
Yeah.
people have magical thinking like that.
Mhm.
And, you know, especially when a lot of this information is filtered through social media, where people can edit their and manipulate their images to appear as though they are maybe, you
Yeah,
know, more
like,
passing than they
yeah,
are, and like these
picture.
surgeries can do
Yeah.
more than they can actually do. And, you know,
Yeah.
I think the healthiest way for like a trans person who wants to transition, these are the people I tend to talk to online, are ones who stay reality based and just say that for me, this is how I need to live to be comfortable. You know, and
I
at a
have
certain point, I'll
compassion
just
for people who could not reconcile with, you know, the gender that corresponds with their sex that they started out living as. I have compassion, you know, I feel bad for them. I do wish most people could reconcile with that. You know, sometimes it's hard, sometimes it hurts.
That seems like the best option would be to accept yourself, right?
You
but
know,
it's like, for some reason, people feel like they can't, and it's so hard to know what to do with that. And I still haven't, I feel like I still have so many just like unresolved feelings on like transition and benefit and like, you know, youth transition and what does it even mean to be trans. And it's like I feel very certain about what sex is. I'm not deluded in that way anymore.
Yeah, I really like being able to distinguish when I'm using sex-based vocabulary and gender-based vocabulary so that I can be really clear with people, and so that people who use it one way and who use it another way can understand what I'm saying, and hopefully not get offended, but just understand that I'm trying to like communicate clearly. So that's why a lot of the times I sound ridiculous and I'll be like, "Oh, male, man."
I know, but like if you know your audience, it's wise to speak to that audience. I
hope my audience is
I'll use their language. If that's what helps me communicate, I will use terms like cis instead of like biological, if that's what it takes to get someone to hear me, you know. I
don't want people to get caught up in like stuff like that to me isn't like the crux of the issue. Like that's not where the conversation needs to be at most of the time. Most of the time the conversation is not about what language are you using. So, or it shouldn't. There's a lot of other things we need to talk about. So it's like, I just want to do it in a way that's clear and that hopefully doesn't make like a huge chunk of people just have a mass exodus from being able to talk because I said a certain word a certain way.
Well, I really like your writing style. I was so glad like I turned on notifications because like I wasn't getting your tweets, and it's like, yo, algorithm, do you even know me? Like this come on, like
thank you.
Like you would think you'd be like front row for me, and I'm like, what the fuck? Aww. So now I know.
I need to start substacking. I really need to start substacking. I will.
Yes, because it's like you're making it. Saying I like your tweets, it makes it sound more like frivolous, you know.
I pay to write long tweets right now. they feel less serious than a Substack would.
But it
feels like less pressure than a Substack article. It's
true.
It's like a few paragraphs. Like
I can feel that. I made a Substack and I wrote like a couple things, and I've just been so lazy about like the intellectual effort it really takes to like boil down information and articulate it in a way to express yourself. That's like takes your brain working.
Editing, you know? I want to go back and edit, and I don't want to regret later not having gone back and edited, but I also don't have the pressure on me to be like, oh, did I do it perfectly, you know? Because when I have the pressure on me to do it perfectly, then I don't want to do it at all.
Right, I know. That's like where I'm at with a lot of projects. I'm like, you know, I don't know, like I haven't been streaming as much. I've been like kind of preoccupied and stuff, and then I'll get too hyped up on like, oh, everything's doing like perfectly in this way and that way, and then I won't do it. And I would rather like right now I just kind of like putting out like, you know, imperfect real like conversations just to like inspire other people to know that like people are having these conversations in the first place. You know, you're not alone for questioning things, and there is a better way to communicate. And I feel like like difference feminism is probably the answer to so many issues that like fall into my interests, like between like the manosphere and red pill and the general like sex and gender wars. Like that's what it feels like on the internet a lot of times. There's so much hostility between men and women. It's terrible. it's really sad, and men and women need each other to function, to like carry on the human race. So it's like we need that, just a movement for women that truly like advocates for us, but without you know being hateful. Even though I think like most people who would be like called like TERFs and stuff aren't even hateful, but I do feel like there are some that that are that frankly
Yeah,
are
there are
quite
some people that
label.
are like interested in insulting people's appearances and demonizing people and shutting them down and stuff,
Yeah, and
but
dehumanizing, like,
yeah.
that's never the answer.
But there's just so many other people who are called or even call themselves TERFs who are actually like really thoughtful and compassionate and not
Yeah,
into that at
yeah.
all. Like they're
I
not
use
gonna
that
like
label,
run into a
like,
trans
in a
person and try to insult them. They're not going to.
yeah.
They're not gonna
I
try and
use
like
the
make your day shitty.
I feel like that label, I use it, like, semi-ironically sometimes, because it's like anytime I go against, like, the, gender ideology narratives of whatever, like, I get that label. So it almost feels like to just use it preemptively and just, I don't know.
Yeah,
These labels just don't hit. None of the insults hit. I feel it fucking invincible in a lot of ways, at least like on the internet. Which, how pathetic is that? Like, but like
nah.
the things people like say to try to hurt me, it just doesn't hit the same way it used to. And I think part of that is you just get older and you get more sure of yourself, and you know,
For sure.
anyway.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But
In
we're
terms of
coming up like on 2 hours, so I do have to start wrapping up, like,
okay.
in the next like 5 minutes or so, just so I can let
Okay.
my
Yeah.
boyfriend back in. I
Oh
kicked him
goodness.
out.
Yeah.
Well, no,
Yeah.
he's at the gym right now, but he's
Yeah.
been out for a while, so I don't want to do too
Yeah.
long. And I haven't been smoking inside. If anyone has noticed, I did not smoke one cigarette. Yes, I was vaping and drinking many
Oh.
beverages, but there was no cigarette this stream.
Oh. A lot
I've
of
only been smoking like
control.
5 cigarettes a day. I've been doing good, but
Whoa.
and well, maybe I shouldn't brag about this. I almost like burned down my whole house because I left like a cigarette burning on my porch. Porch caught on fire, and luckily cops were driving by. They shut down my whole block. They had to like rebuild like part of the porch. Anyway, public service fucking announcement. It is hot out. Be careful with your cigarette butts. Don't be an
Oh
idiot
my
like me.
god. Jeez.
Everyone's fine, but it's just like I can be careless sometimes. So I just carelessly left a cigarette butt burning, as a lot of smokers do, and it caught fire. And thank God someone saw it. But
Oh my god, yeah. Well, we might need to do another stream because we didn't. Oh, wrong way. We didn't get into radical feminism per
I
se
know,
that much.
I
So
know.
radical feminism is not really difference feminism. Usually,
Mhm.
like the traditional radical feminism is more like wants to minimize thinking about sex differences and thinking about any like inherent reasons why any gender roles come more naturally to anyone.
Oh, yeah, I'm
They
not as familiar. Like I haven't dived much into any feminist theory in so long, just because I felt like I already had it unlocked. Like I read the hits, and
yeah.
but I should. And I've been so into like being heterodox, like, and reading like I've been so
Yeah.
in that zone that like
Yeah.
I haven't really touched on a lot of
Yeah.
classic like feminist literature. So I would be really interested to hear more about
Yeah,
what you've been
I'm
learning in that.
just
Like,
starting to get into like the sort of like lesbian radical feminism and sort of like read it with hopefully an open mind and sort of incorporate it with my concepts of Marxist feminism and difference feminism and kind of try
yeah.
and make some sort of image of the world that vibes with me and my thoughts and my
Yeah.
values. So I'm working on that. I'm really at the beginning stages of that, but wrong way again. I'm trying to read Lesbian Heresy right now by Sheila Jeffries.
Hmm.
It's from like the early 1990s. She has a couple other books that are from more recent, and she does talk about part of it that I really connect with is how queer theory like impacts women or females to identify, out of being women and identify as
Hmm.
non-binary and sort of like to like not really have this sense of like lesbian solidarity and to work
Mm.
against sort of having like women's spaces be different from like gay men's spaces. Like lesbian
Mm.
spaces aren't supposed to necessarily have the same vibe as gay men's spaces, and
Yeah.
but queer theory kind of like mixes it all together and like kind of
Yeah.
it all up. So I think that's some of what
Wow.
she talks about. She also talks about, like how does porn impact women, and different things like that that are really common to talk about in radical feminism. So I'm trying to sort of take some of that in, but I hope we can do like maybe another stream. I just like vibe with you so much. I always want to talk about
I know. Well, hey,
like,
especially right now, I'm like unemployed. So that's why I was like, all right, I've just been kind of like smoking weed and lying around a lot. So I'm trying to like get the ball. And also, I was totally sidetracked. I get like hyper fixated on like people and topics. And I was like hyper fixated on like Grace Thorpe and like the Thorpe family and that whole internet drama. I don't know if you even want to go into that.
Wait, is that the polycule? No. What is
no,
that?
No, it's more, it's like, it's
I don't know
hard
who
to
that
explain.
is.
And I don't want to get demonetized again.
Okay, I'll just Google
it. But for our next stream, maybe that would be a good point of reference to talk about that book. I'll look into it because that sounds super fascinating.
Yeah, and she has a couple books. I keep doing the wrong. She has a couple books recent, and one of them is about like queer theory. I think it has queer in the title. I can't remember the title, but she has one that's much more recent that has queer in the title. It'll be like more focused on that topic. But this one, like, I'm hoping to understand the history because I feel like I was like disconnected from the roots and the whole history and lineage of like women's activism, feminist activism, lesbian communities, lesbian activism, how we viewed each other, how we viewed ourselves as like women or lesbians or like women's spaces. What were those like? I feel like it was all cut off by like queer theory and being woke. So I'm trying to figure it out through this book. And also I found some of the like elder lesbians in my community and figured out how to hang out with them, like where to go. They were so nice. No. And I was low key like, yeah, I want to be in like women's spaces and lesbian spaces because I feel like I missed out on that opportunity. And I feel like, you know, gay male culture kind of infiltrated the queer culture and made me feel like my gayness needed to resemble the men's gayness. And I want to know what it was like for other people to grow up with like this women's community or lesbian community or different around them. So I found
that's a really good idea to like,
really excited. They were so nice. They were so nice. And they're not going to be mad at me for like saying I'm a woman and valuing womanhood because I'm more used to that because they've been around longer than before all this queer theory and woke like took over more. So this Sheila Jeffries critical of like queer theory, and then obviously there are probably several other people that we could look into, but I'm gonna try and read some of this. I'm trying to overcome like ADHD and like dopamine addiction to like videos and games.
I started on my Discord a 1-page a day book club just to make sure every day I'm opening a book. You know, so all you have to do to be in the Discord book club is just read one page
a day. That's not a terrible idea. That's actually kind of cool.
Right? Because it's like just to get
and then if it's good, you like
that's been helping me build back up. Some days I only read one page, some days I read for hours, and I found that to be like kind of helpful. But I had the same thing where like I jump from book to book, or I jump from video to Twitter to book to, and I'm just constantly like just rotating my dopamines, like hitting.
All right, and I got one more summary thing for anyone who doesn't know about me. I'll try to do it fast too. So I thought for a lot of overlapping and intersecting reasons that like I was like pansexual, and then Ray did the detransition. We were like, oh, no worries, like I'm everything's good. But it turns out like that was sort of like my empathy and compassion and confusion about myself and disconnecting from my body and my desires, not understanding myself, and sort of like you know, woke ideals and queer ideals and like you know, putting others before myself kind of thing that made me think like I'm pansexual more so because I felt like I wanted to be or I should be or that was the compassionate thing to do. But you know, in terms of like sexual orientation, I match, you know, what one would expect for like a lesbian. So like our just sort of more, we don't know if we should use the word platonic or romantic, depending on who we talk to, because for some people like in the queer community, it's like, sexual orientation and romantic orientation are two different things to them. And then a lot of people are like, no, those are together, and I never even thought about them separately. So
it depends.
we might start saying platonic, but like loving platonic relationship, like very, very, you know, like we care about each other so much, like you know, so it's like a good marriage, but like we realized like he's autosexual, autogynephilic, and not, and like his pheromones changed, his body changed, everything, and I can't really be into like the same like kink now that it's more like a kink now rather than just like
then being
like I'm having sex with essentially like a woman. It's more like I realize, you know, this is a guy, and it's like kind of like a proclivity or interest. It's a sexuality, it's a behavior and a desire in a certain way, and it's like different psychology. It's different to think about it. So we realize our sexualities, just like our sexual orientations or desires, like don't match up, and we're not gonna force ourselves to, like, I was like, oh, should we go to like a sex therapist? You know, should we like figure out how to make them like work together? Like what points can done, but it's so much work, and we're starting to realize like we deserve to, like, you know, lean into what comes naturally to us, what we naturally so we're not like pissed off about it. And we've always been in a non-traditional relationship. Like when we got married, we were polyamorous, and then we like went monogamous when he detransitioned because he wanted to, and I was like, that's fine, I don't mind. Like we weren't dating anyone, so now it's like we're like you know, like are we kind of in essentially like a platonic marriage, like life partnership, and then like we're able to like date other people. So he's actually encouraging me to go like find these women's spaces and these lesbian spaces and like meet people and feel like accepted and welcome and kind of lean into like who I am. And so that's kind of what I'm going through, and that's also why I'm reading lesbian heresy and not just reading about just straight up feminist history that has nothing to do with being gay. So yeah.
It's so fascinating, the whole just like how your perception and desire changes, but there were very real physical changes, like you said, and like the pheromones, the texture, the behavior, all of those things are part of attraction, are what we're attracted to. You know,
and like he's like a super great person, and I'm like super proud of like the way that he conducts himself, and I think he's like really compassionate, really nice, and really conscientious and considerate, and it's like probably still like my very favorite person, and like we're just so connected. Like I've healed so much, like emotionally and physically as a person. Like I'm so much more capable now because of how we've like what we've done to help me heal the relationship, and like all our conversations are great, all that stuff. So I don't mind being in like a marriage with him. It's actually, it's like highest privilege in my life.
But that makes me so just happy that you guys have such an amazing, just open, intellectual, like pushing each other to be better, like relationship, and giving each other that space to explore each of your own like orientations as you're coming to understand them.
We don't want to like he calls it like negotiated desire or something, when you're like trying to figure out how to make it work. Like if you both have responsive or situational desire, or you can't figure out like what type of behavior and like vibe you both like get really aroused by and excited by, like like what, like how, like that's so difficult to like parse and go through, like figuring all that out. And like a lot of traditional married couples would maybe be like, that's my main focus, and some people would be like, oh, like you're risking like ruining everything if you like have sex lives outside of your one relationship. Like people on polyamory all the time, or like open marriages, and that's true, but it's hard. You have to be responsible. You have to think about the other person, even when your like hormones are going crazy and you're like, I'm falling in love with someone else. Like you have to like, remember to reel it back and be logical and be compassionate to your like partner that you live with or whatever. But yeah, so anyway, there's all that going on. But I don't know. We found out there's even like a book about like friend, like marriages between friends. Like that's
really, wait, what's it?
Oh
What's it
god,
called?
it's on my phone.
What is it?
Let me get it. I walked by an indie bookshop or like some sort of co-op store yesterday, and they had the book in their window and said we're having a book club meeting in July to talk about this, and it was about like marriages, like non-traditional marriages between friends. Let me see.
And I think you can have like platonic love for sure.
So the popular book about it is
Oh,
The Other Significant Others, Reimagining Life with Friendship at the Center by Raina Cohen. The Other Significant Others. So yeah, so like it's a whole thing. People call it like queer platonic relationships often, but I don't know. It's whatever. But yeah, I think it could be a healthy way of life, but we're also open to like change. Like when we got married, we had in mind that there would be like a lot of change in our lives potentially,
mm-hmm.
and that we would try to navigate it together, and that if anything ever like didn't it didn't feel right anymore and it wasn't working and it was like negative thing in our life to be married and we tried our best and like it was like a detriment to both of us and it wasn't going to change, like that ending a marriage is not like a failure of the marriage, because like while you
Yeah.
had the marriage it was good and positive.
Yeah, I feel the same way about like past people. I'm still like on great terms with all of my exes. I've never had like
Yeah.
the falling out because I just
Yeah.
also tend to be with people who are communicative, who I value beyond just like this romantic relationship. And I still have a lot of care for, people in my past and only, want the best for them. And I don't view it as failure because I did have so much fun and grew so much in
Yeah.
those
Yeah, it's like a good
relationships.
relationship at the time. It's good for your life. Yeah, exactly. So
Yeah.
not that we're going to end the marriage or anything like that. It's going great right now, but there is that like sexual orientation or sexual desire mismatch that we're kind of becoming sort of the idea that, you don't have to force yourself to negotiate desire, like he put in the chat. You
Yeah.
don't have to force yourself to negotiate it and figure it out when it's hard. You can like
Yeah,
go
because it comes from
pursue what's
something that
right.
is
Yeah, what's easy.
so many people are troubled
Natural.
by their desires or have desires that they, don't know what to do with. But at a
Yeah.
certain point, you just have to, with certain things tend to be more like an orientation. And you have to, like you're saying, either integrate, suppress, or,
Yeah.
those are really the only options.
Yeah. Or go
But
buck
you have to
wild
find
with
like,
it
like for me, like I find
not great
like,
usually.
maybe it's not a perfect analogy, but like there's some substances I can do sometimes and like be okay with, like weed or alcohol, and other things I just have to
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
suppress all desire for, because even going down that road is a bad option. I don't know, maybe
Yeah.
there's some analogy there, but
I can do moderation with alcohol as long as I don't purchase it to have at my own house, and have it like, seldom and not too much of it at a time, but not be
mhm.
like, oh, I don't drink. I can do that. I can handle it, even though I've been through a period of time where I was basically like an alcoholic before.
Same. I was like one of my first things, I
Yeah.
was a heavy drinker like in my early 20s, late teens, and now I just have like maybe 2 Bud Lights like a
Yeah.
couple times a week tops, maybe
Yeah.
once.
Yeah.
Not that
I was
much, but
basically like going through like my worst like alcoholism when I started dating Ray, and he was like super like forgiving to stick around and like see me through that and be like, oh, like now you're recovering, this is great, like you drink
yeah.
less. Like I was like, how, what, why, how was that okay? But okay. Like
Right.
I was
Well,
drinking
because
enough to like get
everyone
sick,
has their afflictions, and some people, as long as you can see they have this like general desire to be better, then you can like.
Yeah.
I give people a lot of leeway if I see that desire, and
Yeah.
because you can work
Yeah.
with that. You can work with like
Yeah.
people who want to be
Yeah.
better,
And then
But
yeah. And then there's the other substance that I've struggled with was weed, and I'm pretty sure I can't be moderate with that. I have to be
mhm.
sober from it, I'm pretty sure. Although I know that I have to be forgiving of myself if I do have a little sometime, but I try not to because it's like a slippery slope. So yeah, it's totally like
Yeah.
certain desires and proclivities you can be moderate and integrate, and
Mhm.
others you have to stay away from. And I think it's an individual thing. Like there are
Yeah.
some APs who legitimately are like, I figured out how to like, not be, plagued by my thoughts of AGP desires. And it's like, did you figure that out? But like also maybe you did. Like you're probably different
Yeah.
from the next guy, so who knows?
Yeah, exactly.
Like,
It's so situational.
yeah. All right. Anyway, it's close to the 2 hours, and we don't want to leave your boyfriend outside.
Out in the cold. All right. Well, it's always so nice to talk to you, and I'm gonna start thinking about the next conversation because I would have a lot to say about choice feminism, sex work, and how that pertains to like
Oh my
radical
God, yeah.
feminism, ideas of the past. I think we can probably integrate that into some
Yes,
thing.
definitely.
Or,
This lesbian heresy book talks about, like, she's critical of like sadomasochism when that started to be a thing in the lesbian community. She describes when that started to be a thing, what it was like, and how and why she's critical of it. So
yeah. That'd
but
be
yeah,
super fascinating to unpack. Do you want to
yeah.
shout yourself out where people can do the plugs?
Basically, I'm just on Twitter. Jules Louise, Geez Louise.
I'll put a
And
link in the description. And Substack is coming
oh yeah, we think
maybe
so.
someday.
And then Ray has a channel. I sometimes appear on his channel, but not that often. And he's Ray Alex Williams on YouTube and on Twitter or X, whatever.
Great. All right. Well, thanks for everyone for watching, and thank you, Jules, for joining me. And let me hit end stream. And